They say when the vampire king chooses his blood mate, it's a sacred bond, a destiny written in the stars and sealed in blood. For him, it's the ultimate power. For her, immortality and a throne. For me, it was a death sentence. The night King Kaelin's eyes, colder than the grave, locked onto mine across the blood moon ceremony, and he declared, "She is mine." My world didn't become a fairy tale. It became a prison, because I have a secret that could shatter his entire kingdom. And the moment he tries to drink from me, he will die. My name is Elara, and I was nobody. A orphan, a blood bag. My only purpose was to be a quiet, compliant source of sustenance for the vampire elite. For 20 years, I kept my head down. I hid the strange, silvery scars that coiled around my wrists, a relic from a past I can't remember. I pretended not to feel the searing pain that sometimes flared in my veins when I was near powerful magic. I played my part perfectly, the fragile, invisible human. It was the only way to survive. The blood moon ceremony was a joke. A ritual King Kaelin was forced to endure every decade to appease the old traditions. He didn't believe in fated mates. He believed in power. And power he had. As the most beautiful and powerful vampire nobles presented themselves, the air was thick with arrogance and perfume. I was just there to serve wine. But when Lord Zane, the king's most vicious general, shoved me into the circle as a cruel jest, the entire court laughed. Until the crystal at the center of the room didn't just glow. It exploded with a light so pure, so blindingly white, it was like a star had been born in the throne room. And the king, he shot to his feet, his eyes wide with something I'd never seen in them before, shock. And then, possession. The laughter died, the silence was deafening. Kaelin stalked towards me, a predator circling wounded prey. He didn't see a mate, he saw a flaw, a mistake in his perfect, powerful existence. This, his voice cut through the silence laced with venom. This fragile, pathetic creature is what fate has chosen for me, a mortal blood bag. She is not my mate, she is a stain. He rejected me, publicly, brutally, but the ancient magic of the bond didn't care. A silvery, ethereal thread snapped into existence between his heart and mine. I felt a pull, a terrifying warmth. He recoiled as if burned. The bond was sealed, rejected or not. And his first command as my mate was to have me locked in the highest tower out of his sight. He thought he was imprisoning a nuisance. He was actually caging a bomb. A gilded cage is still a cage. My world had shrunk to these 4 opulent walls. The silvery thread that bound me to Kaelin was a constant, physical reminder of my paradox. I was both the most powerful and most powerless person in the Citadel, the rejected queen. The servants brought me exquisite meals I could no longer taste, and silken robes that felt like cobwebs against a skin suddenly too sensitive. The bond was changing me. The world was too loud, too bright, too slow. I could hear the whispers of the guards outside my door, the scuttling of mice in the walls 10 floors down. I was becoming something else, and the terror of that transformation was a cold companion. But fear is a great motivator. I remembered the old stories my real mother whispered to me, fragments buried under a lifetime of hiding. Stories of our people, the Sanguine Alchemists. We weren't just victims, we were architects of life and death. And if I was to survive, I needed to become an architect once more. My first foray was small. I focused on the young maid, Lissa, who brought my meals. Her mind felt like an open book, a flutter of simple thoughts and fears. As she set down the tray, I looked into her eyes and pushed a gentle thought. You have already cleaned this room. You see the dust, and it displeases you. Her eyes glazed over for a second. She frowned, looked around, and began diligently wiping down already spotless surfaces. My heart hammered. It worked. This small power, this clouding of a weak mind, was my first key. The royal archives were forbidden, a fortress within a fortress. That night I stood before my chamber door, focusing on the 2 guards outside. Their minds were like rusty locks. I poured my will into them, imagining a disturbance in the West Wing, a sound of shattering glass. The effort was a physical drain, a headache blooming behind my eyes. One guard shifted. "Did you hear that?" the other grunted. "Rats, always rats." I pushed harder, layering the sound with a flicker of movement in their peripheral vision. With a curse, they both strode down the corridor to investigate. I slipped out, my heart a wild drum in the silence. The archives were a cavernous maw of shadows and knowledge. The air was thick with the dust of centuries and the faint, metallic scent of old blood on parchment. I wasn't looking for fairy tales. I was looking for military history, medical journals, anything about the war that exterminated my people. I found it in a forgotten corner, scrolls bound in what looked like human skin. The official history called it the Great Purification. My people were labeled blood witches, our alchemy a plague. But I found another text, a personal diary from a vampire historian who expressed doubts. He wrote of the alchemist's ability to purify blood, to heal vampiric diseases, to strengthen their kind. He questioned the king's, Kaelin's father's, motives. Fear, he wrote, fear of a power he could not control. While I was unraveling his past, Kaelin was unraveling in the present. In his war council, his generals debated border skirmishes, but all he could feel was a dull, persistent ache in his chest, a pull towards the tower. It was a phantom limb, an agony of absence. "Sire," Lord Thuron, his oldest friend, leaned in. "Your thoughts." Kaelin slammed a fist on the table, the marble cracking. "My thoughts are that you are all wasting my time." The room fell silent. He never lost his composure. The bond was a weakness, and in his world, weakness was death. He stormed out, the silvery thread pulling him like a fishhook. He stood outside my tower, his breath fogging in the cold night air, fighting the instinct to go in to see me. He wasn't sure if he wanted to strangle me or something else entirely. His frustration boiled over. He burst into my room, a storm of dark energy. "What sorcery is this?" he snarled, grabbing his own chest where the thread originated. "This pain, end it." I stood my ground, the diary's words giving me courage. "It's not sorcery, Your Majesty. It's destiny. And you're the one who rejected it. This pain is the consequence of your own pride." He looked stunned, then enraged. No one spoke to him like that. He crossed the room in a blink, his hand closing around my upper arm. Not to hurt me, but to force me to look at him. The contact was electric. The thread between us flared, bright and warm, and the pain in his chest vanished, replaced by a shocking, overwhelming sense of rightness. A low growl escaped his throat, not of anger, but of pure, unadulterated shock. He released me as if burned, staring at his own hand. "What are you?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. The attack came at the royal ball, an event I was forced to attend. I was a spectacle, the mortal doll on the vampire king's arm. Lord Zane and his cohorts surrounded me, their taunts sharp and cruel. "Perhaps the king needs a demonstration of what a real mate should be," Zane hissed, his fangs elongating. He moved to grab me, a public humiliation meant to break Kaelin's. What happened next was a blur of beautiful, horrific violence. One moment Zane was leering, the next, Kaelin was between us. He didn't just fight, he unmade. He moved with a speed that defied physics, a whirlwind of obsidian claws and lethal grace. He didn't kill Zane. He made an example. He broke every bone in his body, leaving him a mewling, broken heap on the ballroom floor, a testament to the price of touching what was his. The silence was absolute. Kaelin stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving, his clothes splattered with blood that wasn't his. His eyes found mine across the room, and in that moment I didn't see a king or a monster. I saw a man standing at the precipice, realizing the woman he'd rejected was the only solid ground he had. He saw that I wasn't cowering. I was analyzing. I was calm. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating fury that mirrored his own. The pawn was off the board. The game had changed. The courtship of the vampire king was a thing of dark wonder. It was no longer about jewels. It was about statecraft. He began visiting my tower not to demand, but to discuss. He laid out scrolls detailing trade disputes with the Fae, asked my opinion on a rebellious northern province. "They are poor. Their lands are barren. Taxing them further will only breed more rebels," I said one evening, tracing a map. "And what would you do, my little alchemist?" he asked, his tone laced with a new, unfamiliar respect. "Give them a reason to be loyal, invest in their lands, send engineers, not tax collectors, help them build irrigation systems. A prosperous people are a loyal people." He was quiet for a long time. "A radical concept, compassion as a strategy." "I prefer to think of it as a different kind of alchemy," I replied, "transforming leaden loyalty into golden devotion." A faint, genuine smile touched his lips. It was a devastating sight. This was more dangerous than any threat. This was understanding. My secret journeys became more daring. I found a wall in the archives that hummed with a familiar energy. Pricking my finger, I let a drop of blood fall onto the stone. It absorbed the blood, and a door, seamless and invisible, slid open. The air inside was pure, untouched. This was a Sanguine Alchemist's sanctum. The scrolls here told the true origin. We did not serve vampires. We created them. Millennia ago, we used our alchemy to save a dying human king, binding his soul to the night to cheat death. It was meant to be a partnership, a covenant. The vampires provided protection, the alchemists provided purity and stability, preventing the descent into mindless hunger. But Kaelin's father saw not partners, but servants, then slaves, then livestock. The final scroll was a prophecy, written in my mother's hand. When the king of blood rejects the heart of life, the world shall fall to shadow. Only when the poison becomes the cure, and the cure acknowledges its debt, shall the balance be restored. The poison was my blood. The cure was his acceptance. The coup did not come as a surprise, it came as a tide. Zane, healed by dark magic and burning for vengeance, led it. But he was a puppet. The true mastermind was Lady Seraphine, the elegant ancient matriarch who had hoped to be queen. She saw Kaelin's attachment to me as a fatal flaw. The citadel became a slaughterhouse. I was separated from Kaelin, protected by a dying Thuron who gasped, "He needs you, you are his anchor," before falling. I was cornered in the throne room, Seraphine herself advancing, her fangs dripping with venom. "A fitting end for the last blood witch. You will die in the place your kind were once honored." I was out of options, out of tricks. As she lunged, I didn't raise my hands to shield myself. I raised them, palms out, and embraced the power inside me. I didn't just create a wall of flame. I became the flame. A nova of pure, white, alchemical fire erupted from my core, blasting Seraphine and her guards to ash. The entire throne room was scorched, the ancient stone glowing. The fighting stopped. Every supernatural being felt that power. It was the power of creation and destruction, the power of their origin. Kaelin found me standing in the center of the devastation, the white fire still dancing along my fingertips. The bodies of his enemies were dust at my feet. He was wounded, bleeding black blood from a gash on his brow. He didn't look at the destruction. He looked only at me. The awe on his face was absolute. He walked through the ash, his boots crunching, and without a word he went down on one knee. He, the vampire king, knelt before a mortal. "All my life," he said, his voice raw with emotion, "I was taught your kind were a blight, a disease to be cleansed. I was taught that our power was ours alone." He looked up, his crimson eyes meeting mine, and in their depths I saw not a king, but a man who had built his life on a lie. "But this is the truth. This is the power that made us. I have not been protecting my kingdom from you, Elara. I have been protecting it from the truth, and I was wrong." He bowed his head. "My mate, my equal. My queen, forgive me." The vampire king was not just acknowledging me. He was surrendering to a truth greater than his throne. The bond between us was no longer a chain, but a symphony, each thread humming with a power I had never dared to imagine. But in that perfect, terrifying moment of union, the world itself groaned in protest. The seer, the ancient one Kaelin had consulted, materialized from the shadows, her form flickering. "The balance is broken," she cried, her voice the sound of crumbling stone. "The king's rejection and the alchemist's hidden wrath have strained the veil. Now your union has torn it. The Umbra comes. It is the void born from your discord, and it will feast on this world until nothing remains." We didn't have to see it to feel it. A profound coldness seeped into the citadel, a numbness that went beyond temperature. In the courtyards, soldiers dropped their weapons, their will to fight leeching away. Lissa the maid forgot why she was crying. The Umbra was unmaking reality, and our love was the catalyst. The only pocket of life and color was the sphere of light generated by our bonded auras. We were a single candle in an infinite, hungry dark. "The prophecy," I whispered, my hand in Kaelin's. "When the king of blood rejects the heart of life, the world shall fall to shadow." We had fulfilled the condition for doom. Kaelin's face was grim, his kingly mind racing through strategies that no longer applied. "How do we fight a shadow?" "We don't," I said, the final piece of my ancestral knowledge clicking into place. "We become the dawn. The prophecy has a second half. Only when the poison becomes the cure and the cure acknowledges its debt shall the balance be restored." I looked at him, my heart laid bare. "You must take my blood, Kaelin, not as a king claiming his right, but as a partner accepting his other half. You must trust that my love has transmuted the vengeance in my veins into life." and I must trust you not with my life, but with my people's legacy. There was no time for a grand ceremony. There was only us, the howling void, and the truth. I offered him my wrist, the one bearing the alchemical scars. My life for yours, I vowed. My heart for your kingdom, my poison for your cure. His crimson eyes held mine, and in them I saw the weight of his father's sins, the fear of his own nature, and a love so profound it burned away all else. My strength for your protection, he vowed, his voice thick. My eternity for your moments, my debt he paid in full. He lowered his head. The moment his fangs broke my skin, the universe held its breath. There was a sharp, sweet pain, and then not an end but a beginning. A torrent of pure, golden power flooded from me into him. It wasn't just blood. It was memory, it was song, it was the collective love of my entire lost lineage, flowing through me into the king who would finally honor them. The poison, the vengeance, it was washed away in that current, transformed by my conscious choice to love him. He drank, and his form began to glow, not with vampiric red, but with the same brilliant, life-giving white light that I wielded. Our joined power did not explode outward, it unfolded. It was a wave of dawn that swept across the world, gentle and inevitable. Where it touched the umbra, the shadow did not vanish. It was integrated, becoming the gentle, nurturing dark of night, not the hungry void. Vampires standing in the citadel courtyards looked up as the true, warm light of the sun touched their skin for the first time in millennia, not burning them, but filling them with a vitality they had never known. The balance was restored. The vampire king and the sanguine alchemist were one, and the world was made whole again. They call us the Dawn King and the Twilight Queen. He is the strength of the night, and I am the heart that gives it purpose. We rule a kingdom where vampire and the newly rediscovered sanguine alchemists live in the covenant they were always meant to have. The bond that once connected us is invisible now, because it is no longer a tether between two separate beings. It is the very foundation of who we are. He thought he was claiming a mortal. I thought I was harboring a secret. But we were simply two halves of a single soul, and our crimson vow was the promise that made us whole.